The Sealey how-to video on motorcycle fork seal replacement. Before commencing, it's essential that you're wearing the correct personal protective equipment. SSP 55 disposable gloves and SSP 61 safety spectacles are ideal for this purpose. This video shows the procedure on a Yamaha XJ600S Diversion. For other makes and models, please refer to the manufacturer's workshop manuals. The strip down procedure. Firstly, undo the front brake caliper fixings. Remove the caliper and using VS 0354 caliper support hooks, hang it on the bike's handlebars to prevent damage occurring to the brake hose. Then the bike needs to be supported on an FPS 5 front headstock stand. Undo the front wheel spindle and remove it together with the wheel. Measure the amount of stanchion protruding out of the yokes and make a note of it ready for reassembly. Next, loosen the fork caps. It's a lot easier to do this now while the stanchions are still clamped in the forks. Loosen the pinch bolts on the upper yokes, followed by the lower ones. The forks should then be free to slide out. Mount the forks in a vise. It's ideal if you fit soft jaws to prevent any damage occurring to the forks. Cover your workbench with SCK-15 absorbent mats or clean paper towel. It's essential that you place your hand firmly over the spanner and fork cap when you're unscrewing it to prevent the spring from escaping and causing injury. With the spring tension released, you can remove the fork cap, spacer, spring seat and spring. Make a note of the order they're fitted in, ready for reassembly. Next, remove the fork from the vise and slowly pump out the old fork oil into an MDR P01 drain pan. Replace the fork in the vise and use a VS 1808 motorcycle spindle tool to prevent the damper rod from turning. You can then unscrew the hex bolt and copper washer from the outer fork tube. Now tip the tube and the damper rod and rebound spring will slide out. Please note there is a Teflon ring on the damper rod. Don't remove this unless you have a new replacement. Use a scraper or screwdriver to prise off the plastic dust cap and remove it. Using a picking tool from the AK5209 scraper and hook set, hook out the wire retaining clip that holds the fork seal in position. Reposition the fork horizontally in the vise. Then, using the stanchion like a slide hammer, pull back firmly on the stanchion repeatedly to extract the fork seal. After the seal, there's a large washer and the top and bottom bushes. You need to note their positions ready for reassembly. There's also an oil lock piece, which is often stuck in the bottom of the outer tube. This needs to be removed to enable you to clean the fork properly. Turn the fork tube upside down and tap it until the cap drops out. The final stage of the strip down procedure is to thoroughly clean all the components. Brake cleaner, sprayed using a TP01 brake and chemical sprayer, is ideal for this task. Mount the fork tube in your vise and lubricate it internally with a small amount of fork oil. Then, place the rebound spring over the damper rod and slide the pair into the inner fork tube until they protrude out to the other end. Next, refit the oil lock piece over the end of the damper rod. The inner tube and damper rod assembly can then be inserted into the outer fork tube. Using a VS 1808 motorcycle spindle tool, hold the damper rod and secure the assembly using the hex bolt and washer. You will need to apply non-permanent thread locking liquid to its threads and tighten it to the manufacturer's torque setting. Then slide the outer guide bush down the inner fork tube, slide the washer down into position, and use an MS016 fork seal driver to fully seat the bush. We're now ready to fit the new fork seal. Firstly, if there's a sharp groove at the top of the inner fork tube, use some electrical tape to cover the end and apply some fork oil for lubrication. The new seal may come with a coating of grease. If it doesn't, use a little fork oil to lubricate its inner edges. Then you can slide the seal with the lettering on it facing upwards down into position on the tube. Then by hand push it into the fork tube, ensuring it remains level. Next, using the MS016 tool again, push the seal fully down. You can check this by looking down the tube. The retaining clip groove should be visible. If it isn't, slide the seal further down. The retaining clip can then be placed in position, followed by the dust cap. The cap should push home by hand. If not, use the MS-016 to tap it in. Now add the fork oil. Refer to the manufacturer for the correct volume and use a calibrated jug, such as the JT05 measuring jug. Some manufacturers don't quote the amount of fork oil volume. They state air gap figures instead. This involves using a specialised measuring system, such as the one in the Sealey MS-033. Reassembly. We're now ready to refit the internal components. Firstly, insert the fork spring with the closer wound coils towards the top of the fork. Then add the spring seat and spacer. Now extend the fork as far as possible and place the fork cap onto the spring. You'll need to push down hard to both compress the spring and screw the cap clockwise at the same time. But be careful not to cross-thread the cap. Don't fully tighten the cap until the forks are back on the bike. Reassembling the forks is the reverse of the strip-down procedure. But remember to tighten all the fixings to the manufacturer's torque settings. And that completes the Sealey how-to video.